Okay, so let me quickly introduce the two other members of our panel. Jim Hofmockel, Director of Capital Markets for Accrescent Financial Corporation. Accrescent is based in San Juan, in Guaynabo, Puerto Rico, and it has subsidiaries in the Dominican Republic and in the Republic of Panama. And also Eduardo Inclán, co-founder and managing member of Blue House Capital. Eduardo is an investment banker and has experience with small business investment companies. So let me start by asking a question directed at Jim. Jim, if I have a company that is looking to expand and diversify its sources of liquidity, could an Act 185 fund play a key role in those business plans?
No, not at all, sir.
Okay, let's go.
No, thanks, Ivan, and appreciate you guys inviting us up here and for the presentation here. There's a lot of things that can be done with Act 185. It's called the Private Equity Funds Act, but you're not limited to equity-only investments. And my background comes out of the financial services space, both with investment banking as well as private equity. And I've, over the years, used a lot of special purpose entities to raise financing for various projects. Essentially, what you're able to do is through a qualified vehicle under the Private Equity Funds Act, 185, you're able to put any instrument, you could purchase any kind of a debt instrument or other type of instrument that you want and still take advantage of the tax incentives. And so one of the things that we've been kicking around is some structures that involve senior debt. You could put senior loans into an Act 185 fund, where the 185 fund purchases those loans from an originator. And you get the investors in the fund would still get all the tax benefits, which are very substantial, but they'd also get a different investment profile than a typical private equity investment. So instead of a longer horizon investment that is multiple years of investing and then relying on exits and events for it to occur, senior debt investments can amortize over 4 years, and what that provides is an ability to get liquidity much faster. So one of the concepts that could work is you could offer investors the ability to get taken out after 2 years. They could actually cash flow out. So you put your money in, you get all your full tax benefits based on your investment, and you get paid a current return during the investment period, and then you can go to the investment manager and say, oh, it's 2 years from now, I've got some other use for my capital. I want to do something else, so I want to draw it from the fund. A fund with those sorts of investments could actually do that for investors. So it's a completely different investment profile. I view it as kind of a hybrid between securitization and a money market fund. And so it has kind of aspects of both of those types of vehicles, but you could put a lot of different assets in these things, and the tax benefits are still available the same as if it was a private equity fund.
Do you think that it would be challenging to raise capital from Puerto Rico investors, given the fiscal challenges that the Commonwealth is facing?
It's very interesting because one of the provisions in the Act allows for 40% of the capital to be invested as still a full benefit fund, can be invested in companies outside of Puerto Rico. So again, you can offer investors a diversified pool of assets, diversified even outside of Puerto Rico, with 40% of them being from anywhere else outside of Puerto Rico. So local investors who might want to have some diversification away from exposure in Puerto Rico, you could provide that. And basically, you could customize a lot of different structures, a lot of different risk profiles within the structure of the Act 185.
Thank you. Eduardo, you're familiar with small business investment companies. Would it be possible to combine an SBIC and an Act 185 fund into a single investment vehicle? And if so, what would be the benefits?
Hi, everybody. Well, I think that just to add a little flavor to what we were talking before. I think the law itself is fairly new, but it seems to provide a lot of flexibility, not only to house any typical private equity type structure, but to be creative, like what Jim is doing, and we've actually thought about many other possibilities that would be very, very interesting. In our case, I guess our first take at the law is to fit in a traditional private equity vehicle, and we focus on a small business investment company, which for some background, it's a private equity type structure that it's regulated and sponsored by the SBA, and the idea is to invest directly in Puerto Rico companies. We're thinking that the 60% the PR fund structure is the most ideal, because 60% going into Puerto Rico will provide the most benefit, and definitely it is. We think that the tax deduction it's really a driver in seeking to raise Puerto Rican capital. So we've looked at the law parallel to developing a fund, and it happened to fit perfectly within the framework of 185. We didn't really have to change anything to make it fit. It fits fairly cleanly. So yes, an SBIC it's an option that can fit within 185, and it's an example that hopefully we'll see more of them using this law as a strategy to raise some local capital alongside stateside capital.
Thank you. Edgar, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Simple one. Are there any filings required?
We didn't rehearse this one, so.
Okay. Are there any filings required with the IRS and PR Treasury for the fund to be taxed on a flow-through basis other than the filing under Act 185?
Well, basically, what is interesting about this law is this law says that the fund has to be taxed as a partnership. So the fund has no option but to be taxed as a partnership. Now, that partnership treatment is for local purposes. So as Ivan was explaining in his presentation, one of the things that you have to do in order to be eligible for Act 185 is to do a filing with Treasury. That filing in and of itself is enough in order to basically be recognized as a fund, and therefore, because by statute, the fund is taxed as a partnership, that will do, you can basically wear belts and suspenders and also do the election to under 645, file the Puerto Rico Treasury Form 6045 in order to reaffirm your partnership status. But basically, by law, it's going to be a partnership. Now, that is very interesting because for U.S. purposes, this fund, unless the fund makes an election in the U.S., the fund is going to be viewed as a corporation for U.S. purposes. So unless somebody files a form, basically in the U.S. is an entity classification election, which is using Form 8832, you have to, if you want the fund, the Puerto Rican fund, to be treated as a partnership for U.S. purposes, you have to do a check-the-box election with the IRS in order to make sure that you have the double flow-through. It's flow-through in Puerto Rico and flow-through in the U.S. Otherwise, you're going to be in serious issues, thinking that you have a flow-through structure for U.S. purposes while you have a corporation for U.S. purposes.
Okay. Before taking any questions, I would like to summarize this by saying that Act 185 is unique, and in my view, it'll play a key role in Puerto Rico's economic development in the near future. And I bet that in every major merger or acquisition taking place in the next few years, an Act 185 in Puerto Rico, an Act 185 fund will be directly or indirectly involved. The law is very, very attractive, not only because of the tax incentives, but also because it is not intrusive in the management of the fund. So having said that, if any of you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Okay. Anything you want to add, Eduardo, Jim? No? Okay, good. Well, thank you very much.